demonstrations, the Syrian Arab Army eliminates scores of terrorists in the countryside of Aleppo, Idleb, Dar'a, Homs and Hama. Hundreds of Turks demonstrate in Antioch in denunciation of the terrorist organization's crimes and in solidarity with the Syrian people. Sada city is declared in a state of disaster and Sana'a airports out of service as Saudi warplanes continue their massacres in Yemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our news for today. A Syrian Arab Army unit has eliminated terrorists and destroyed their mortar guns podiums downtown Dar'a. In Hom's eastern suburb, the Syrian Arab Army also destroyed ISIL hideouts in 3 villages. In Hama countryside, moreover, terrorist gatherings were targeted and their vehicles were destroyed in 4 areas. In Aleppo, a number of Takfiri armed men have been killed or injured during Syrian Arab Army operations that targeted their positions in Al-Jandul, Castello, ancient Aleppo, Al-Sakhur, Al-Layramun, Bab al-Nasr, Bustan al-Qasr, Al-Firdaus and Bani Zayd neighborhoods. The military source which reported this added that Syrian Arab Army units also destroyed the supply lines of al-Nusra terrorists, eliminating a number of them in Aleppo northwestern and southern countryside and destroying their machine guns. Special operations have been carried out by the Syrian Arab Army in Idleb, where al-Nusra vehicles were destroyed at Dawar al-Mutlaq along Idleb al-Mastume axis. Several terrorists were moreover killed or wounded in Afis, as well as near the National Hospital in Jisr al-Shughur and its southern entrances. Vehicles belonging to armed men were also destroyed between Jisr al-Shughur and Bashlamoon, and their terrorist occupants were killed or wounded. A number of gunmen were, on the other hand, killed in 3 villages and the surroundings of Al-Qarmid factory in Idlib countryside. The Syrian Arab Army has meanwhile targeted the vehicles of the so-called Al-Fatah army along Bzeit al-Msharfa axis in Jisr al-Shughur, destroying some of them and killing scores of terrorists. Hundreds of Turks took to the streets in the city of Antioch in denunciation of al-Nusra crimes against unarmed civilians in a number of villages in Idlib countryside. The demonstrators stressed that the Turkish regime is offering all types of military assistance to armed terrorist groups, expressing solidarity with the Syrian people. The Turkish police prevented the protesters from reaching the city's main square, using tear gas to disperse them. The demonstrations came one day after the Turkish Soul newspaper published an article about 6 Al-Qaeda terrorists transported from Syria into a local hospital in Antioch for treatment. Within the same context, the Turkish Hurriyet newspaper revealed that a special American force has arrived in Turkey to begin training the terrorists of the so-called moderate opposition in Syria. The newspaper quoted unidentified sources as saying that about 40 special U.S. troops arrived in Turkish Hervanli base in Kırşehir city to open a training camp for the terrorists within 10 days. The same sources added that at least 400 terrorists will be taking part in the training. Welcome back. Syria's permanent representative to the UN, Dr. Bashar al-Jaafari, has affirmed that Syria is one of the earliest signatories of the Nuclear Arms Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1968, out of its conviction that possessing such weapons jeopardizes international peace and security. In a statement he made during a session of deliberations held within the review conference of the Non-Proliferation Treaty at the UN headquarters in New York, al-Jaafari pointed out that Syria was also the first to call for an area free of nuclear arms and all other weapons of mass destruction. He referred to Israel's defiance of the international legitimacy resolutions as it has continued to develop its nuclear arsenal with the support of some member countries which possess such weapons and which themselves are signatories to the treaty. The fact that some nuclear member states are actually providing Israel with the internationally prohibited nuclear technology for decades, as Jaafari added, constitutes a flagrant violation of those states' commitments according to the provisions of the first article of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov discussed during a telephone conversation with his U.S. counterpart John Kerry the situation in Syria, Yemen, Libya and the Ukraine. The Russian Foreign Ministry pointed out in a statement that the two ministers exchanged viewpoints on the steps the international community needs to take in order to launch a political process in Syria in order to find a political solution to the crisis. The ministry pointed out that the phone call was made by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Saudi airstrikes continue to target Yemen's infrastructure, destroying hospitals, airports, power and oil stations and leaving hundreds killed or wounded. The airstrikes targeted Sada city north of the country, killing more than 300 people since the beginning of the Saudi aggression, in addition to leaving widespread destruction in infrastructure, prompting local authorities to declare it as a disaster zone. The Saudi warplanes targeted Sana'a airport, damaging a number of passenger planes. In the city of Taiz, military sources stressed that the National Army and People's Committees confiscated weapons dropped by Saudi planes to Hadi's supporters. For his part, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Jawad Zarif stressed the importance of finding a political solution to the crisis in Yemen. Finally, Libyan warplanes conducted airstrikes against the so-called Fajr Libya militias in Al Hira area in Ghirian city southwest of Tripoli. The Libyan army foiled attempts by these terrorist groups to attack Al Watiya air base, inflicting heavy losses upon them. Army units advanced towards new positions south of Raqdalin city. Meanwhile, the Libyan government confirmed the killing of 7 journalists, 4 Libyan citizens and an Egyptian photographer, in addition to 2 Tunisians, by ISIL terrorists. With this to conclude our news for today. Thank you for watching. Now to the latest business and market news with Karun Kürkcan, but after a short break.